Hey y'all, welcome back to Bowls with the Bard. My name is Cakes, I am your host. I am back, we're back, my appendix is not back. It is never to return to Bowls with the Bard, unfortunately. This week and next week, we will be rounding out our Shakespeare's Drag Race portion of Around the Canon in 80 Days. This week, we are bringing you a high summary of The Merchant of Venice, and next week, we will be covering Twelfth Night. So, without much further ado, let us smoke a bowl and summarize this play. Act 1, Scene 1 of The Merchant of Venice. Alas, Antonio knows not why he is so sad. It's certainly not his business ventures, those are going well, and he is definitely not in love, though some productions use that as quite the lie. Bassiano enters with Graziano and Lorenzo. Antonio tells them that the world is a stage and his part is a sad one. Graziano answers this by saying, "Let me play the fool then." Graziano and Lorenzo then peace out, and Bassiano tells Antonio that he has fallen in love with a rich lady in Belmont named Portia. He says he understands that he has already borrowed a lot of money from Antonio, but he would like to borrow more to woo this Portia. Antonio agrees to this. Act 1, Scene 2. We are in Belmont with Portia and her serving lady / best friend, Nerissa. Portia is complaining that she can't choose her own husband. Her father has set up a test with 3 caskets. Wooers must choose the right casket to win her hand in marriage. Nerissa tries to comfort Portia by telling her that, hey, the right suitor for her will pass her father's test. Nerissa then lists all of Portia's most recent suitors, and Portia poo-poos them all. Nerissa then comforts her by telling her that none of these suitors were willing to take her father's test. A serving man then enters and tells Portia and Nerissa that the Prince of Morocco has come to try to woo Portia. Act 1, Scene 3. Bassiano asks a Jewish man named Shylock to borrow 3,000 ducats in Antonio's name. Shylock says that he hates Antonio, but he thinks he'll do it. Just then, Antonio arrives, and Antonio and Shylock argue over whether or not interest is right or wrong. Shylock says that just last week, Antonio spit on him and called him a dog. Can a dog lend money? Why should he? But finally, Shylock agrees to lend the money if Antonio will agree to give him 1 pound of his flesh as bond. Bassiano tries to dissuade Antonio from agreeing to this, but Antonio agrees to it without fear. He says he has plenty of merchant ships out and he is going to make twice or thrice what he owes Shylock very soon. Act 2, Scene 1. Back in Belmont, the Prince of Morocco insists upon taking the casket test. Portia tells him that if he takes the test and he fails, he is never allowed to woo a woman for his wife again. The Prince of Morocco still insists that he will take this test. Act 2, Scene 2, we meet a servant of Shylock's named Lancelot. He has decided that he is going to run away from Shylock's home and become a servant to somebody else. Just then, he bumps into his blind father on the street. His father was coming to bring a gift to Shylock. For a while, Lancelot messes with his father, doesn't reveal his identity to him, but he finally gives in and tells his father who he is. He then asks his father to give the gift he was going to give to Shylock to Bassiano, and to ask him if Lancelot can become Bassiano's servant. Then, very conveniently, Lancelot and his father run into Bassiano on the street. They both try to ask Bassiano to allow Lancelot to be his servant, but they keep cutting each other off. When they finally get to their point, Bassiano says yes. Then Graziano, a servant and friend to Bassiano, enters and asks to accompany him to Belmont. Bassiano says yes, but behave. Act 2, Scene 3. Jessica, Shylock's daughter, bids a tearful farewell to Lancelot. She asks him to bring a letter to the man Lorenzo. When Lancelot leaves, she tells the audience about her plan to steal a bunch of gold from her father and to run away with Lorenzo. Act 2, Scene 4. Graziano, Lorenzo, and others are planning a mask for Bassiano's going-away party. Suddenly, Lancelot enters with a letter for Lorenzo. When Lorenzo reads the letter, he finds that Jessica has agreed to run away with him. Lorenzo then tells Graziano her plan to dress up as a page boy and to steal her father's riches. Act 2, Scene 5. Back at Shylock's home, Lancelot invites Shylock to Bassiano's going-away party. Shylock is reluctant, but agrees to go. Then, Lancelot sneakily tells Jessica that Lorenzo will come for her tonight. Act 2, Scene 6. Outside of Shylock's home, Graziano is waiting for Lorenzo. He is late, and Graziano said that that is unusual for a lover. Lorenzo shows up, he calls for Jessica, and she flings open her window. She throws down a bunch of gold and says that she's kind of embarrassed to come down dressed as a boy. They tell her to come down anyway. She comes down and steals more gold and jewels on the way out. She and Lorenzo then quickly peace out. Antonio enters, and he tells Graziano that the weather has not been good for Bassiano's going-away party, and that Bassiano is going away tonight. Graziano should probably hurry up and join him at the ship. Act 2, Scene 7. The Prince of Morocco is taking the casket test. He has to choose between a casket made of gold, a casket made of silver, and a casket made of lead. He makes the decision to choose the casket of gold, but when he opens it, he finds only a skull and a scroll that tell him that he has lost. Embarrassed, he leaves in haste. Act 2, Scene 8. Solarino and Solanio discuss Shylock's epic fit upon learning that Jessica has run away with his gold. They also discuss Antonio's sadness upon Bassanio's departure. Act 2, Scene 9. Back in Belmont, the Prince of Aragon has arrived to try the casket test. When he tries his hand at it, he picks the silver casket, and when he opens it, he finds only the portrait of a blinking idiot and a scroll. Once again, this prince leaves in haste. A servant then enters and informs Portia and Nerissa that a Venetian has arrived to try for Portia's hand. Nerissa hopes that this is Bassanio. Act 3, Scene 1. Solarino and Solanio learn that one of Antonio's ships has crashed in an English channel. They then run into Shylock and they mock him for Jessica's departure. They then ask Shylock if he has heard anything about Antonio's business ventures. He says that he has not, but if Antonio cannot pay him back, he will have his bond. They ask him why, and Shylock responds with one of Shakespeare's most iconic speeches, asking, "Hath not a Jew eyes? Do Jewish people not have everything that Christian people have? And in that way, should Jewish people not be allowed to have revenge in the same way that Christian people are allowed to have revenge?" Then another Jewish man named Tubal enters and informs Shylock that though he knows that Jessica is in Genoa, he was unable to find her. He tells Shylock that he has heard that she is spending big money where she is. Tubal then tells him that he has overheard that another one of Antonio's ships has crashed and that Antonio is undone. Shylock prepares to demand his bond. Act 3, Scene 2. Portia begs Bassiano to wait a little while to take the test so they can spend some time together. Bassiano insists upon taking the test, though, so Portia asks for some music, and she ponders what will happen if he wins or if he loses. While Bassiano takes the test, he proclaims that people and things that are beautiful on the outside aren't always so beautiful on the inside, so he chooses the chest made of lead. Inside, he finds Portia's picture and a scroll that tells him to claim her with a kiss. Portia then gives Bassiano a ring and tells him never to part with it in all of his life, no matter what the reason may be. He agrees to this. Graziano and Nerissa then decide to reveal that they are also in love and desire to be married when Portia and Bassiano are married. Then Lorenzo, Jessica, and a servant arrive at Portia's home. They arrive with news that all of Antonio's business ventures have failed and that Shylock is demanding the pound of flesh from Antonio. Portia says that she will send Bassanio with double or quadruple the original payment, but first they must be married. Then she decides that she's going to take a quick look at the letter from Antonio. Upon reading the letter, she decides that things are too urgent, they don't need to be married first, and she sends Bassanio and Graziano off to help Antonio. Act 3, Scene 3. Antonio begs Shylock for his life, but Shylock will not budge on this issue. Antonio then prepares himself to die. Act 3, Scene 4. Portia asks Lorenzo and Jessica to take care of her home, while she and Nerissa go to a monastery to pray for their husband's safe return. Portia then sends a messenger to her doctor cousin and tells Nerissa that they are not going to a monastery, but that they will dress up like men and follow their husbands to Venice. Act 3, Scene 5. Lancelot jokes around with Jessica and Lorenzo for a while, and then Jessica praises Portia. Act 4, Scene 1 is the long-ass scene of The Merchant of Venice. So, before we continue, let's smoke a little bit more weed. Act 4, Scene 1, we are at Antonio's trial. The Duke asks Shylock if there's any way he could show maybe a tiny bit of mercy. Shylock says no, because he hates Antonio. Antonio tells the Duke and Bassanio that there's no point in reasoning with Shylock because Shylock is a Jew. The Duke asks one more time, Shylock, can you really show no mercy? Are you really going to own and take away this human life? And Shylock retorts, what about your slaves? If I told you to free all your slaves right now, would you? No, you consider them property. At this, the Duke then says that he thinks that it's time to dismiss court, unless one Dr. Bellario is present. Nerissa then enters in disguise as a lawyer's clerk with letters from this doctor. These letters say that the Dr. Bellario is very sick, and so he has sent another doctor of law named Balthasar with his opinion. Enter Portia as Balthasar. Upon hearing about the case, Balthasar decides that it is indeed lawful for Shylock to have this pound of Antonio's flesh, and that if Antonio is to live, Shylock must show some mercy. Shylock asks, why must I show mercy? And Portia/Balthasar responds with the famous, the quality of mercy is not strained speech. Shylock says he will not show mercy for double or even 20 times the owed debt. Bassanio begs the Duke to use his power to step over the law in this case to save Antonio's life. But Balthasar says, no, don't do that. It sets a precedent that will allow other people to abuse their power in the future. Balthasar orders the court to prepare to have Antonio's flesh removed and asks if Shylock will at least show mercy in paying for a surgeon to save Antonio's life after the fact. Shylock reads over the bond and says, nope, that's not in there, I'm not gonna do that. Antonio says he's prepared to die and asks Bassanio not to feel guilty for his death. Bassanio and Graziano say they would give their wives' lives if it could save Antonio. Portia and Nerissa in disguise are like, okay. Suddenly, in an aha moment, Balthasar realizes that in the bond it says that Shylock may have 1 pound of flesh, but he may not have any blood. Then he also realizes that it is exactly 1 pound of flesh. So Shylock may have no more nor no less than 1 pound of flesh. Balthasar then also orders that Shylock must be responsible for taking this flesh, so no other man can mess it up. Shylock then says, actually, Bassiano offered me 3 times what he owed me, so I think I'm just gonna take that instead. Balthazar then says, no, you demanded justice only, and so that is what you will have. And if you will not have that, well, you're a foreigner who plotted against the life of a Venetian, so you're gonna die for it. The Duke then says no and spares Shylock's life, but says that Shylock must give 1/2 of his wealth to Antonio and 1/2 of his wealth to the state. Antonio denies his half of the wealth. He says he doesn't need it, but instead he thinks that Shylock should have to give 1/2 of his remaining wealth to Lorenzo and all of his remaining wealth to Lorenzo upon his death. Antonio also says that Shylock should have to convert to Christianity. The Duke agrees to this and asks Shylock if he will accept his fate. Shylock does, and then he runs away. Antonio and Bassanio go to Balthazar to thank him for what he has done. They offer him the 3,000 ducats they were going to give to Shylock. Balthazar says, no, but I'll take that ring, though. Bassiano says he absolutely can't do that because he promised his wife. Balthazar and the clerk then leave, and Antonio says, yo, dude, I really think you could have given him that ring. It was all he wanted as payment for saving my life. So, Bassiano sends Graziano to give Balthazar the ring. Act 4, Scene 2. Graziano delivers the ring to Balthazar, and Nerissa, in disguise as the clerk, decides to try to see if she can also wriggle her ring away from Graziano. Act 5, Scene 1. Back in Belmont at Portia's home, Jessica and Lorenzo have an exchange that suggests that maybe they're not as in love as they thought they were. Then a messenger arrives to alert them that Portia and Nerissa are on their way back home and should be back before morning. Just as that messenger leaves, Lancelot arrives to tell them that Bassiano and Graziano will also be home before morning. Lorenzo decides to put on Portia's house music before she arrives. Just then, she arrives, she hears the music, and she comments on how she appreciates it a little bit more because she went a day without having it there. Just then, Bassiano and Graziano arrive right on the heels of Portia and Nerissa. Nerissa then discovers that, hey, Graziano gave her ring away. Portia says, oh, my husband Bassiano would never do that, and then discovers that, oh shit, he did. The 2 women scorn the 2 men for this, and then Antonio begs for forgiveness on their behalf. Portia then gives Antonio a ring in place of the ring that Bassiano has given away, and Nerissa does the same. Antonio gives the respective rings to the respective men, and the men realize that these rings are, in fact, the rings that they gave away in the first place. Portia then gives Bassiano a letter revealing to him that she was the doctor of laws who saved Antonio's life and that Nerissa was the little lawyer's clerk. She then gives a letter to Antonio revealing to him that 3 of his ships that were thought to have been lost have actually come into port with money for him. And finally, she reveals to Lorenzo that he is Shylock's new heir. And that, my friends, is the Merchant of Venice. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to see more content like it, please like us on Facebook at Bowls with the Bard, subscribe to us on YouTube and WeedTube at Bowls with the Bard, and follow us on Instagram at Stone Shakespeare. We will see you guys next week for 12th Night. Bye! Where sad true lover never find my grave to weep there.